Welcome to Read Your Comics. Today, I'm looking at Splitting Image number 1. Before I get started, I just want to give a quick thank you to all the subscribers that have recently joined the channel. If you are new to the channel, be sure to hit like and subscribe for more of this great content. Well, as anybody that's been following the channel for a while knows, I've been doing this 1993 journey. It was a pivotal year in comics, probably some of the highest sales across the board, not for any one individual title per se, but across the board. Image was in its second year. Valiant was popping really big. Marvel and DC were still doing big numbers despite losing their biggest artist to Image. So now that Image has made its, kind of splash on the scene, it's time to do a parody book. And there were other companies that did parodies of Image that were kind of like mean-spirited, but in the tradition of like What the or Not Brand Deck, the Image guys actually recruited Don Simpson to do a parody book of them. And it's done pretty well because it is Dandy Don Simpson. Each of these covers had like a backside like this that had the original creator. So here's Liefeld doing his spoof on his own Youngblood. I mean, you can see like he's got crossbones in his face and his head's a tire with a tire track going down. He's got a sand bucket on his head. And then we also have another one, Spasm number 1, which is pretty funny. I mean, it's basically the Spawn 1 cover, but instead of his like glowing ectal powers or whatever, it's like cash running through. He's got a bottle of energy pills. McFarlane did it, and it's pretty funny. I don't have the whole set. There were 4 of these, and I think the other one, there's the Eric Larson one, and I believe Jim Valentino ones. And this is something I'm kind of trying to put the set of them together. It's not a high priority for me. It's just kind of when I run across a splitting image, I pull it out, look, see what's on the back, and if it's one I don't have, I'll go ahead and grab it. I'm going to go ahead and look at this one, though. It's the same book. Well, actually, real quick, let me point this out. This one, I didn't do this on purpose, but this one is a newsstand edition. And I find it interesting that these feel different. Like this one, the newsstand one definitely feels thinner. And even the paper on the inside, while the direct market doesn't have the glossy, it's definitely thicker paper than what's in this. This is closer to newsprint on the newsstand edition. It's definitely thinner, just a little bit. And you can feel it. You can even like kind of see it in the page turn maybe. I mean, I can see it. I don't know if it's coming through in the camera well, but I found that interesting because they still charged $1.95 for it. They didn't change the price, even though they went with some cheaper material on it. Anyway, so taking a quick look at this, it's, clearly a parody book. It says the egos, the greed, the gimmicks. The Image guys were pretty aware of the things being said about them at the time, I would say. And they kind of rolled with the joke. And, honestly, it was good publicity for them. The more they were talked about, the more they were in the limelight. The all news is, or what is it? Even bad press is good press, the saying, something like that. So anyway, it's definitely got that layout of like a classic, like a Not Brand Deck or something. These here are the creators. I like Todd wearing his hockey gear, and Liefeld looks like a buck-toothed kid. This I didn't get. I didn't get it then, and I didn't get it immediately now. This is Larson, but I'll explain that more in a second. Valentino looks like some kind of beast. You got Silvestri looking like just like a handsome dude. Wills is, they kind of portray him, I guess, because he didn't really have a book coming out. And I mean, there is some like tragic stuff that happened to him around the time Image was launching, which prevented him from launching his title. But he wasn't considered a founder, and so he was included in this. And Jim Lee, who they call Lotus Lee in this, this stuff hooked up to his head is kind of funny anyway. So Rob Liefeld gets some credit because I guess this was a rough idea that he had, and I don't know how it came about. Maybe he was hooked up with Don Simpson. So Don Simpson actually does this in the same year with Eric Larson. So there was a connection there, and maybe they just were having like a discussion, or Rob had the idea, and said like, maybe we should get Don Simpson to do this, who was kind of known as a superhero satirist with his Megaton Man book. And he was definitely a good choice to pull this off. Definitely a good choice. Essentially, this story is going to be about the Image founders leaving Marvel and founding Image, with obviously humorous takes on it. So they start out there in this satellite, and it's they're calling him Lotus Lee. It's Jim Lee's satellite, and they make all these jokes. Well, first they go through all their personality type. They do a pretty good job right here of kind of defining the personalities of each of the Image creators here. Their names are Lotus Lee, God McFarthing, Brat Lifeguard, Name Withheld, Val J. Tasmania, Sly Virality, and what's his name? What's his name? And okay, so this I thought was interesting. Name Withheld, because I was like, which one is that supposed to be? And then a process of elimination, like, oh, it's Liefeld. And you're like, well, why would Liefeld not want his name withheld? Did he not want to be parodied in this or something? Because he did one of the back covers, and he did that Savage Dragon Megaton Man, so it didn't make sense to me. I had to go to the internet and look that up, and well, it's kind of story relevant, so I'll get more into it in just a second. But it makes this joke land probably the best, and I definitely did not get this joke when this book originally came out. So it goes through their personalities, and Lotus Lee is the smartest and the richest. The McFarthing says that, he's radical and takes positions and radical career moves. Lifeguard is the hothead of the group. He's a spoiled kid, basically. Name Withheld is a loose cannon who shoots off at the mouth. And it's this one, the Tasmania. He's like, hey, I thought I was the hothead, militant, radical, loose cannon. He's like, I thought I was all of those things, but I guess I'm just the moody doomsayer of the group. This one's Silvestri, Sly Virality. He's like, I'm just easygoing, happy to be working and making money in comics, man. I'm just extremely successful, and I got nothing to be upset about. And then Wilt was his name, is just happy to be there. So they're up on the satellite, and they're playing a game of Monopoly with real money, and Lotus Lee keeps winning and taking all their money. I don't know what that's really in reference to, because, sure, Jim Lee was making some bank on X-Men at the time, but really all of them were. McFarlane made enough off of, doing Spider-Man to retire for a little bit there. And they kind of go through and talk about the books they were working on. This is funny. The God McFarthing, he's all contorted, twisting up, playing the Monopoly, and they did a book called Spineless Man. Now here comes Name Withheld, and this is where the story relevancy comes in. He mentions here how he's in a feud with a writer, and that writers want him to make these pages that look like boring with just a bunch of dialogue and stuff. So instead, he just makes like a cool splash page of the character that he can resell. And he said, storyline be damned. Screw the readers. And this is pretty funny because apparently Larson wrote a op-ed to, I think it was Comics Buyer's Guide that he wrote it into. And he did it under the name, it was titled Name Withheld, and it was, sent in anonymously. And later, I guess by this point, he had already admitted it was him. But he did it when he was still working at Marvel at the time. Anyway, he wrote this op-ed basically blasting writers. And I might do a video more in depth on it, but he has some fine points. He's talking about how writers shouldn't be paid as much as the artist gets paid, or shouldn't be upset that the artists are getting paid more, because of the amount of time it takes an artist to do one book is more involved than the amount of time a writer spends working on one issue per se. And most writers were doing, 4, 5, 6 books at a time, as well as being, in many cases, being editors. He makes some valid points, but at the same time, he is totally dismissing the writer's importance to the story. And I find, like, in hindsight, that's definitely ironic when you look at, how Image ended up being perceived as fluff, nothing but image, just, cool art, no substance at all. And ultimately, that was kind of the downfall of the early Image and the comic boom in general. It was this lack of substance, and where Valiant was definitely the more substantive company with the lesser art, I would say. And there's some good art at Valiant, but they were yin and yang to each other. But they both played the speculator game, and ultimately that was the big burn. Anyway, so it kind of goes through like what they all do. The Sly guy, he's like, I don't really have any problems. I get to take all my aggression out doing this character, the Wolverine-like character. The Tasmania, whatever they call him, the Valentino type character. He talks about rebooting Guardians of the Galaxy, and he's complaining that the editor essentially told him that the colorist was the reason the book it was being successful. And then all the characters are like, oh, the guy that gets the coffee is more important than you. Lifeguard talks about how he created X-Force. And it's funny here. So, okay, right here, you get these little things. It says debris, important later. And then you come over here and it's like debris used to cover tiny feet entirely. So they're in on it. It's like they get it. They hear the things being said about them, and they roll with it. So anyway, he also alludes to the Levi Jeans commercial that he did. And here's Spike Lee following him around. And then the Lotus Lee, Jim Lee character is essentially saying, like, I just count my money. I hook up to this computer and it just prints stuff out. It's like printing money, more or less. Definitely some solid stuff going on there. So basically they're airing their grievances about Marvel, which in this is called Marginal, and they're referring to themselves as the Marginal Seven. And they're going to go talk to the bosses. But first they need a group shot. Random girl shows up. I'm Cynthia, the soon-to-be Miss Virality. So I guess this is maybe his fiance. Kind of funny. I don't know any story or background behind that. There must be something to that to put it in there as a joke. They crack me up as Sylvester. He's this big, hunky dude. He's like gigantic. I know he's pretty tall in person, but it just cracks me up. So they go visit Marginal, and you get like kind of the Wizard of Oz thing with Smiling Stan. I forget what they call him, but it's essentially like the Wizard of Oz, but Stan Lee's mustache and grin. Then you go back in here, and it's the president of Marvel, who I'm not sure who that is supposed to be. I didn't take the time to look it up again, but assuming this isn't Tom DeFalco or like the editor-in-chief, this is supposed to be like the president of the conglomerate that owned Marvel at the time. And they go see him, and they're like, wow, look at all these t-shirts and action figures and stuff. And he's like, yeah, they're doing quite well too. And Lifeguard's like, cool, can I have a set? And he's like, yeah, they're $12.95 each. So kind of cutting to the whole thing of like how their art was being repurposed and used for things like merchandise, and characters they were creating were being used to make toys, in animation, whatever, and they weren't getting a cut of it, which was an eternal problem, something Kirby complained about too. Pretty good splash page there. The editors come in, and basically they're all kind of like saying like, oh yeah, your stuff is you'd be crap without the trademarked licensed characters that you work on. Like basically you're meaningless. It's the characters that matter. And you'd be flipping burgers without it. I don't know who all these are supposed to be. This one kind of looks like John Byrne to me. The other ones I couldn't really completely make out. That might have been supposed to be DeFalco. I don't know. Maybe this is Peter David. I couldn't really make them out exactly, but I'm sure some of these people have to be representing other writers and editors at the time. So they get in their little squabble, and they make it out like Marvel fired them here. Of course, they won't tell that story even today. Like they didn't tell it then. they make it out like they went into the Marvel office and basically just said we're quitting. Not like we want to negotiate for better things or anything like that. They just said like we're done. They had already come together, decided to form some other thing. Now, truth be told, Liefeld says that him and Valentino actually wanted to keep working on the stuff they were doing at Marvel, but then do this creator-owned stuff on the side. And Marvel was kind of like, nah, that's not going to work for us. You're basically competing with your own stuff. I mean, I can see it. It's like from a business standpoint, I get Marvel's point of view at the same time, but like, I don't know that, I mean, people didn't necessarily leave. X-Force was still a popular title for at least a year after Liefeld left. Guardians teetered off pretty quick. I don't know how, I haven't looked at the sales to see that Guardians was like as mega of a hit as the X stuff was or the Spider-Man stuff was. I do remember it on the shelf, and it did get gimmick covers and stuff. They wouldn't have done that just for like a nothing book. So they decide to form a group, and they call it Splitting Image. And then we start going through like just their parody versions. The Liefeld one's kind of the funniest because it makes fun of how the first Youngblood was a flip book. So he's upside down and his wording is upside down. And then you flip the page and they're upside down. They're like, oh, here we go. The flip book's right now. And they're like, why is the rebel above us though? He's like, I'm holding onto the ceiling just to be sure. And Valentine's like, whoa, you can't create that many characters in one comic. He's like, whoa, this is like a merchandise thing. This is like a merchandise toy catalog, not just a comic book. And I don't know, were there Youngblood toys? I'm sure there was a few, but I always think of Todd as making the toys, and like everybody eventually got some toys, but I don't really remember anybody other than Todd being like very toy driven and focused at the time. I could be wrong. So here we have Name Withheld coming up with this. He's like, but I'm going to update it for a modern age. And we get the Savage Drag Queen. Now, I got to hand it to him too here. He does a good job of mimicking Larson's style. Like this fist looks like a Larson fist for sure. I mean, the people in the background are definitely Don Simpson, but this dragon looks pretty good in mimicking the style. And really all this looked pretty good mimicking Liefeld, but almost a little, even though it's like cartoony, almost looks a little better. But he definitely mimics the faces and stuff, so he does a pretty good job mimicking the styles there. Kind of a contemporary view here of him saying like, hey, what are you doing in the restaurant dressed like that? You can't do that. He says, I just woke up in a cornfield naked and I'm trying different identities to find myself. And so then we get to the Shadowhawk parody, who's like an anvil that just drops on people and cripples them. This part with he's like, they're attacking some woman in an alley and they make fun. The guys are like, yeah, nothing like being in a dingy, dark alleyway puts me in the mood for love. And this guy says, if there's any justice in the world, we'd be crippled for the rest of our lives. And they basically get like cartoon stuff, like dropped on them, a safe, a net full of bricks, and a 1-ton thing. He gets in, this doctor's like, good job, you've paralyzed them for life. Then we get back to the Marvel guy for just a minute, talking about how can we sue these guys for any type of infringement. And I recently saw the cartoonist Kayfabe interview with Eric Larson, and he was talking about how he had a character that wore a bunch of skulls, I believe, and Marvel sent him like a cease and desist for skulls because of the Punisher, and he's like rolling his eyes like, I mean, skulls, really? You're going to try to like trademark just skulls in general? I think that one got tossed out. So obviously Marvel wasn't able to sue the Image guys out of business like they did, say, like Defiant. Even though Image is still going strong today, it's a wholly different company and philosophy. Probably the best splash page of this is definitely going to be the Spasm or Spawn parody that we have. It's pretty funny stuff in this one where he says like, I am called Spasm because I live in constant pain. Hernia, slip disc, dislocated shoulder, and I just stubbed my big toe. All because my creator never studied anatomy, never studied anything except hockey stats. I will take my revenge on my creator. I'm going to get you, God McFarthing. Of course, with all due respect, I could just heal myself on account of my occult powers, but then I wouldn't have my pain. And in the final analysis, one's pain is the only thing one can call its own. So I love this. I do love this splash. Look at his leg bending up like over behind his shoulder. That's probably the craziest anatomy. Even like, well, the hand twisted here is pretty good too. Is the thumb on the wrong side there? I think it is. I think the thumb is even on the wrong side. So pretty good. I think this is like a chain hook, like going into his own head. I don't know that he mimics McFarlane that great, but it's definitely in the Don Simpson style, but he definitely hits that exaggerated style of McFarlane. It's got keys on the end of that chain. And then we're out of time for this issue, so we've still got 3 more to go, and then Dale Keown shows up at the end. Oh, another Canuck. So the next issue, there's only 2 issues of this, and the next one will have Wild Kits, Comma Force, Squirt Works, and Armpit. So it'll have 4 in the next one. And it says plus covers by Lee Silvestri, Portacio, and Keown. I don't know that the second issue had the variant covers, but I'll look into that. And here's an ad for the Savage Dragon Megaton Man. I want to get to that eventually too, make a video of it. It's pretty neat because Don Simpson does most of the art, but Savage Dragon, all the Savage Dragon in it is drawn by Larson. So it's kind of an interesting blend of a story. So that's it for Splitting Image number 1. Pretty funny book, really, and you kind of got to know some of the backstory. You got to be like inside baseball, so to say. But you know, the what-thas and stuff are like that too, because I've picked up a lot of those recently. And when I got those as a kid, you know, the art was funny, and they kind of reminded me of like Mad Magazine. But a lot of the humor in that stuff flew over my head. Like the joke, like I didn't really get the jokes. I liked them. I thought they were funny, but I didn't really get them. And I read them today, and I'm like, this makes a lot more sense because I know more background. You know, I get the pop culture references a lot better and stuff. So it definitely lands better today than for me than it did back then because I was just, you know, a teenager when this originally came out. And I like Don Simpson. This is probably one of the things that, like Don Simpson, this and the Savage Dragon Megaton Man book. Then I started finding more Don Simpson stuff, like in quarter bins and stuff. And so it was nice to get Don Simpson involved in this, and it introduced me to his style because he is a funny dude, and he does do some like really good humor comics. So, you know, if you run across any Don Simpson stuff, definitely give it a look through because it's all pretty funny. And that's all I got for Splitting Image number 1. Until next time, read your comics.